It was Oscar Piastri's first ever Formula 1 race in Bahrain, but we saw something from the McLaren team which we don't actually see that often, which was them actually changing the steering wheel before ultimately having to retire the car. But what led the team to actually do this? Well, here's what actually happened leading up to that moment. The first time we start to see some issues creeping in is on lap 13 when Oscar is heading down the main straight towards turn 1, and the car is bouncing around quite a lot, which is pretty common. It might be due to, the track being bumpy or due to some porpoising issues. Whatever it is, the car is bouncing around quite a bit. And when it's bouncing at its most, that's when we actually start to see the screen go fully blank, just for a few milliseconds before coming back on. Now, this is pretty regular for a lot of teams going that quickly with that amount of vibration, but the difference here is that this happened 2 to 3 times on this one straight, where normally it might happen just the one time with other teams. After this, he doesn't have any other issues until he comes out of the hairpin in turn 8. Here he goes into third gear, and you can hear on the onboard that he goes into max revs and it's hitting the limiter. But on the screenshot here, you can see that the rev lights aren't fully displayed. It's only when he goes into fourth gear that the whole screen once again goes off and then the rev lights come fully back on. After a few milliseconds, this is all resulted fine, and basically for the rest of the lap, no other issues happen. Moving then on to lap 14, and Oscar is coming out of turn 2, but just goes all over the apex and the whole car is vibrating and hitting the rev limiter in fourth gear. But then when we come into the braking zone in turn 4, he downshifts into third gear, which you can hear through the audio, but the screen freezes saying that he's still stuck in 5th gear. Now the car is still running at this point and just sounds like it's in neutral, and the screen goes completely blank by the time he reaches the apex. Then after a little while the screen does come back on, but it now says he's stuck in 7th gear. He then drops it down to 3rd gear and then carries on as normal, but then once again back in turn 8 the screen starts to go on and off again. It seems to have fixed itself, but then coming into turn 10 the screen then goes off again and he's stuck in 2nd gear, and it seems like whatever gear he's in when the screen goes off, that's what the car is then locked to. So then for pretty much the remainder of the lap, he's then just stuck in 2nd gear. For the remainder of the lap, the screen is still off on Oscar's screen. It's only when he comes into the pit lane that the actual screen comes back on, and it's now saying that he's in 8th gear. And whilst he's driving down the pit lane, this is when the car fully shuts off in terms of his screen and the engine. And it's only when he actually gets into his pit box that the screen comes back on into neutral. And as soon as he stops in his pit box, the wheel is immediately swapped out for another. Now there is an electrical signal still coming through as we see the McLaren default loading screen coming on, but after that it goes back to blank and sometimes it flashes into neutral, but ultimately this forces Oscar to retire from the race. Now obviously McLaren after the race have said they're going to investigate what it is, but crucially it's because they didn't have any issues like this during testing, so it's kind of unknown what the issue is currently at the moment. But for me, clearly it's an electrical issue, but it's just about what is the cause for that. Was it from the vibrations going over the curbs or the bouncing or porpoising on the track? We currently don't know at the moment, but that is the reason why McLaren swapped their wheels during a race.